On the road, in the gym, at a coffee house. No matter where you listen, this is Prevention Perk. I'm Steve Miller with Mid-America PTTC. It's time to perk up our prevention efforts. My guests today are Stefan Denson, Dr. Art Silverblatt, and Jessica Z. Brown from DIMLY, Digital International Media Literacy Education. DIMLY is an interactive program that empowers individuals to develop a greater independence from the information conveyed through the channels of mass media. DIMLY offers a teaching model and instructional support for educators and students with the tools to evaluate and analyze media messages. Well, hello, Art, Jessica, Stefan. Welcome to Prevention Perk. So glad to have you here as our guest.
Good morning. Thank you.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I think this is going to be a great conversation because I'm a big fan of understanding media literacy. And I want to get into that by way of asking each of you to just give us a brief bio or background. How did you get into, we're prevention here. Media literacy can serve as a preventative tool. How'd you get into this line of work? What was your interest for that? And let's go ahead and let's start with Stefan on that.
Thank you. My interest in media literacy was solidified when I met Dr. Silverblatt. We had long conversations about his chosen profession, media literacy. I will also quickly point out that my conversations also included Jessica, but mainly they included Art, and we've been engaged in media literacy, or I've been engaged in media literacy with him for 12 years now, to include co-authoring one of his revisions for his books.
Wonderful. And Jessica, how about you?
Thanks, Steve. I don't know where the time went. Stefan really did remind me. Wow, lots of time has passed. But to underscore how time has passed, it was in the 90s that I was on the board of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, the Midwest chapter. Those are the folks who give out the Emmys, by the way. We sponsored a program called Creating Critical Viewers. And that was an interesting proposition because at that time we were meeting the needs of both education and television. And it came to my attention that everything we're talking about here in this field that I had never heard of, media literacy, was everything that I was about, everything that I had done in the community, all the media background. And that was really the beginning. It was the aha moment for me. And from there on, I pursued media literacy and media literacy education.
Wonderful. And how about you, Dr. Silverblatt?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, kind of taking me back. I would say in some ways my story is kind of about academics at its best. I started at Webster University, where I spent my career basically in 1981. And my PhD is in English, actually. And so I spent my first 10 years sort of learning the field, becoming acquainted with it. And over a period of time, I developed this concern and thought about applying some of the qualitative approaches that I've toyed with in terms of print and extending that into other media, because again, that has become more and more the avenues that people would turn to in terms of information, not only reading but also watching and listening. And so it was a sort of a logical academic growth area for me. And I think my first book, I think I started in '93. So it's a while ago, but and we've kind of moved on from there.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. The funder of this project, along with all the other products of the Mid-America PTTC, is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. SAMHSA offers free downloadable publications and tip sheets, as well as mobile apps for youth, teens, and young adults on topics such as substance misuse, common mental health conditions, and coping with disasters and other traumatic events. You'll find a link to these resources in the show notes. So you've written a lot on the topic of media literacy, right? So before we get started in the conversation, can you just give us like a working definition for the audience? What is the idea of concept of
Sure,
media
absolutely.
literacy?
It's a 3-word definition, basically. It's a critical thinking skill that you apply to the source of most of your information, that being the media. It's really an extension of reading and writing. You're reading the not just print, but you're learning to interpret and understand images and audio tracks and what you see on the internet. You're also people are learning to produce it, to write it, and not only the skills to do it, but the necessity to do it ethically and responsibly, which is a big part of media literacy.
Well, I picked up your book after we made acquaintance and I started reading it. And then the first time we had a conversation, you used a statistic. Now, I won't be able to quote it myself, but most people are able to say that media has an impact on their lives, or on people's lives, but they don't think that it has an impact directly on their lives. Is that correct?
It's an interesting thing. Media literacy is not like rocket science. The first and most important step is to admit that the media has an impact on the way that you think. And there was a study that was done, a guy by the name of Jim Teague. This is years and years ago, so who knows? It should be redone. But something like 80% of the people studied, surveyed, said that the media has a huge impact on the culture. And then later they asked, to what degree does it affect you? Only 12% of those people. Well, we redid the study with Jim and some other people, where we introduced the variable of education. And it was not significant variable. It's interesting. People with master's degrees and PhDs had the same dissonance in terms of understanding. It affects everybody else. Doesn't affect me. Well, no. The first step is copping to, in the old '60s term, the fact that no, we are all influenced, and once you do that, then things begin to open up a little bit, and you can begin to see it.
So you've asked that based upon education, and it seems to be, across the spectrum, everybody has that belief system. Is there any insight as to why we think that it doesn't have an impact on us?
Well, it's maybe it plays to our ego a little bit, where we feel like we can figure it out, and a lot of the messages are pretty simple. A lot of the things that you see, buy this, watch. Well, okay, that's a pretty direct message. But often what you find is that there are very subtle messages that are being embedded in the simple ones, that people, if they thought about it, would sort of understand who's bringing you the message, why are they bringing you the message, what's the point of view with regard to it. And so, maybe the surface, it seems so simple that people don't think they have to be very vigilant about looking at it. But there are cumulative messages really about violence. There was a study done a long time ago that the people in power were the people who were most apt to dispense the violence in our media programming. Well, yep. Media is often a text that reflects and reinforces and shapes cultural attitudes and values, behaviors, anticipates things that, because a lot of the people that are projective fiction, talking about AI, for years they've been concerned about issues that we're now getting panicked about. 40 years of projective fiction, science fiction, has sort of should have brought it to our attention had we been paying attention.
Yeah. Well, Jessica,
I was just going to comment, media literacy takes work. It takes a lot of hard work, and what Art is talking about, to be, I guess, surprised by things is often the case. but had we been paying attention, to the previous recessions, for instance, because those warnings were there, but you do have to work hard. They may not have been on the front page.
Well, you've also, Jessica, you've been involved kind of on a social advocacy level with media in the community. Can you talk a little bit about Gateway Media Literacy Partners?
Yes, thank you for asking. We started as an affinity group in 2004 and then became a not-for-profit after doing a lot of research about, should you become a not-for-profit? Is there room for us out there? And there was nothing like it at the time. And Art was involved in this. We started this group, regional in its approach, but we did outreach to the world really because it benefited the region. Talking about what others were doing and how it would help us in the region was an important dimension. But at that time, we were creating an awareness about the need for media literacy and what sustained media literacy education could do. And also the fact that, we needed not to treat it as a flavor of the month kind of approach, but to offer up evidence. So all this evidence was building. You had Art's book, you had other people in the field approving, just from work in the classroom, that you could do things with students of all ages, really, with regard to civics education, health, on and on. Okay. So the group has evolved. It's had its ups and downs, like not-for-profits. You do have to, watch yourself as a not-for-profit and see how you're doing, what you're doing. You have to change your mission. But the social advocacy, I think, continues. For instance, right now we have a program called Media Literacy Around Town, and where we go to people, we go to the communities, and we could go to a bakery. We went to an art gallery last year to showcase a woman who was using media literacy to advocate for children and their safety. So that's an exciting program that we're trying to enliven now. Of course, some of this started before COVID and then, died out for a little bit. So we're resurfacing now. There's another program. We're in a community called Beyond Housing. We're working with this not-for-profit where they have some sustained education efforts, and we're going to be a part of that.
So what was it about, media literacy and really becoming passionate about it? I mean, when you get into, a nonprofit organization and you're really going into schools or youth organizations, what was it that made you think something needs to be done about this? We need to address this. What was that? Was there a moment? Was it being a parent? What was
Funny,
that like?
Yes, being a parent, definitely. But talking to other people, everybody has some kind of opinion about media, including bashing, which in Art's book, he talks about, you have to also consider media as a wonderful entertainment, a wonderful companion, to our culture. So I hated the whole idea of bashing without having sound evidence to bash something.
Yeah, that's an important point, Steve. In many ways, media literacy can help you appreciate what's working well. It's not just bashing, but it's also very important that we add the caveat that media literacy is a nonpartisan discipline and enterprise. We're not telling people what to think; we're telling them how to think. And we're giving people strategies, lenses, basically, that they can hold up and look at media presentations and the media itself to make sense of. Well, what you see is what you see, and it's not necessarily the fault of the lens. If you see a world that has a particular worldview, looking through these qualitative approaches. It's not the fault of the lens. It's what you see. And then what people choose to do with that information is where Jessica's social activism comes in. Some people may choose to adjust their media diet. I want to watch this. I want to put together my own sort of a virtual Rolodex of the people whose opinions make sense to me, et cetera, giving people the skills. But going from there to working with groups that really can use media literacy to promote social justice. But that's the personal choice that comes with the knowledge that we're imparting. And certainly, I'm not saying it isn't political in that sense, but it is nonpartisan, because we're not talking about promoting a particular a political platform or agenda. In this age, it's very important for us to make that statement, because there are disciplines that are being attacked for being partisan when in fact they're not. And so media teaches us that we need to be prepared with a message in response to that, or to anticipate it, so that we're not caught unaware.
So, Stefan, you've done a variety of things across your career. You've been an advocate for civil rights. You have a history in computer programming, including in the AI realm, and now you're the president and CEO at Dimly. Can you talk a little bit about what Dimly is? What's the mission of your organization?
Thank you. The mission of Dimly is universal media literacy. And so in other words, we're not limited to the American shores. Some years ago, about 13 years ago, when Dimly first formed, the group at that time, the approach or their intent was to spread the word of media literacy through electronic books, ebooks. And so they took Art's text and had it interpreted or translated into languages of other countries around the world. And the individuals who researched it, it was a tedious task, because it was a tedious task moving from English into another language for something over 300 pages long. So, but Dimly, pushed forward, and were able to establish translated versions of Art's text into languages of other countries around the world. What we found is that the cultural aspects of different countries, certainly different from American culture, or from that matter, regions within America, that the opportunity for an individual in country B, for example, to take the information that they have and keep it current. Okay, it's one thing for me to talk about the Kennedy-Nixon debates. It might be a foreign language to somebody that's in 5th grade now. They would have no idea what I was talking about. So there's no contextual reference there, no cultural reference. So the problem that we encountered was that while we were successful in getting the book translated and distributed in other countries, keeping it current was a problem, because it was time intensive. And being that it was time intensive, there was a move to find a different way to present the information, or to keep the information culturally current within cultures and between cultures. And that has led this board presently into developing a digital platform that will allow us to have individuals in their particular countries, classrooms, community centers, governments, to be able to apply what is current and with them in terms of their culture, and to be able to apply it in a way that updates the cultural aspects of arts text and keep, as the kids say, keep it moving. And it's done on a much quicker basis. It's more immediate, and so a new version of the book then writes itself in that regards. So Dimly is behind the efforts to do just that. We are looking to make a splash, to make it more prominent, more prevalent locally, and in that way we are able to make it more prevalent globally. So that is the push of the board. That is the push of the organization.
So when you talk about being international, I wonder, so I have a frame of reference for what media literacy is here in the States, and maybe under an understanding of the importance of it. Does that translate globally? Do different cultures see this in a different light? And if so, how's that different?
Other countries see media literacy, the challenge that you have with media literacy generically is definition. So you may have several organizations with differing definitions, or with I guess an extension on a theme. So but still the notion and the impact of media literacy remains the same, remains as important. Go ahead, Jessica, jump in.
Oh, I'm agreeing with what you're saying. What I'd like to do is give some examples across the world with health issues, health messaging. Media literacy is golden in terms of doing production, whether it be a poster or a video, any type of production where the young people are making messages to perhaps counter whatever it might be, sexually transmitted diseases, alcoholism, whatever it might be, to keep them healthy. It has been shown in so many different countries the power of media literacy education in creating health messaging.
I can add to that.
Yes.
Worldwide, it's people are, in different countries are very passionate about media literacy. A lot of this really started in Canada. When I started doing this stuff, I was so naive that I thought I made up the term, as I was writing this stuff. And then I got a notice about a conference in 1992 in Guelph, Canada, and so I went up there, and there 1,200 people were way ahead of me in terms of the importance of value and value of media literacy. The Father John Pungente and Barry Duncan and people like that. Doing wonderful work. One of the obstacles is, as Stefan was saying, is that so much of the meaning is sort of tied to the specifics, the examples that come out of a particular culture. So years ago, I was teaching in Thailand, and I'm talking about something. I use an example, and I was like, well, and the Price is Right, and I'm looking at the students, and they're giving me one of those blank looks with good reason. You've got to make the programming relevant to the people in the culture. Well, what we've been able to do with the Dimly educational model is to take the concepts, the framework, and keep that. And then make the movable text out of examples and research and statistics, and so that instructors from different countries can ask their students to provide and explain and the supporting material. And then the classes become not unlike newspaper production, where they'll be producing their own cultural editions of the text that'll be uploaded to us, and then that can become the template for the following group of people from Greece or Italy or wherever it happens to be. So it's a self-sustaining model that I think is we're trying to develop the digital framework to make this happen, and it's I think it's getting easier to at least conceptualize, but we still have to make that happen. And and then work with partners who can take advantage of this educational model to keep it relevant.
Well, now through the Mid-America PTTC, now our efforts are focused primarily on substance use prevention or mental health promotion, community collaboration efforts. How do you see media literacy fitting into this type of work? Open that up to anyone.
Well, I guess one thing listeners or viewers should be aware of is that in a lot of ways, the media is about marketing. And it's not just what's in writing, it's verbal, visual. It is, and it's not just a TV show or a radio broadcast. It can be the brochure that you have on the wall, or the information placard that you have on the wall, from which you want to depart information to a patient or a client. It can be about the wrapper, a chewing gum wrapper, and the emblem that's on that wrapper and what it implies. Art had given an example once about, I'll date all of us, but there used to be a shampoo called Prel, and it was the emerald green shampoo. And in the commercial, they dropped a pearl, well, what appeared to be a pearl, from the top and let it float down to the bottom, and it flowed slowly. And they gave you, pretty language to go along with it as it was flowing down to give you the impression, I believe, that that's what it'll do for your hair. When you walk down the street, your hair will move in slow motion and it'll wave and it'll do all those things, because that's what Prel is all about. So in a health setting, the messages from the information that you impart, from the way you have a form for someone to complete, how you debrief them after a process is completed, your follow-up, all of those things become media literacy. That is, you are not just a receiver of media, but you are also a producer of media. And so your ability to communicate and be a good producer of media is where there's an impact in not just your area for health, but in any area that we have.
I'm so happy that Stefan mentioned the producer aspect of it, because that is really part of that, what is media literacy? And so you produce, and you can also, if you understand this discipline and you've mastered a lot of it, you can go on to be an activist. And activism is a very big part of this notion of, being media literate, and what are you going to do with those skills? You can become health advocates by the proper messaging and knowing about audience, for instance. That's very important.
Yeah. In terms of mental health and things like that, the media, first of all, can be a text that, again, as I mentioned, that reflects cultural attitudes, et cetera. And so, what is it that, what are the messages that we're getting with regard to mental health, ways that we can promote mental health? We can use the media as tools, because again, it's neutral. You can use it in a positive way. There are all kinds of ways that our current media system, particularly during the pandemic, took up the slack. But it also has affected the way that we relate to our world, and so more and more the media, is become if it was primary before the pandemic, it's more primary now, because At one point, people were talking about moderating, the use of media in lots of ways. Well, during the pandemic, it was, well, no, this is your conduit to the world, and so there really needs to be some thoughtful discussion with kids. I'm going to be a grandpa for the first time, and I'm very excited. And we're already talking about that kind of thing with my daughter and her husband about, being conscious about how you use the media. We're not being protectionist. We're not trying to say that we're not trying to censor information. There's nothing wrong with information so long as you know what it is and you know what it isn't. If you want to read something that's telling you that the earth is flat, if you want to believe that, that's a choice, okay? But you need to understand what it is and what it isn't, and why it's being propagated and that kind of thing. So we're trying to give people the critical skills to make good judgments about what to factor into their worldview, essentially.
Well, one of the things that I find interesting, you said that you're not here to tell people what to think, but how to think. And for a number of years, I've done a presentation about how music, which I think is a media, music impacts the choice, especially during the adolescent experience around substance use, whether it's obvious through various forms of music or whether it's more subliminal in ways. And especially when you introduce the idea and texturing it with a video, it really sends a completely different message, because whoever the videographer was has their own interpretation of the song, and it can imply things in different ways. And I talk about various songs and give examples as to whether or not is that the intention of the artist when they wrote this song, and have that kind of discussion around that. Because I know from my own experience, I could listen to a particular song and say, oh, that's what this is about. And then as I mature and get older, I look at that same song and go, that had absolutely nothing to do with what I thought it was about. And that's a commonly held phenomenon with individuals, especially when you go from a developing mind in the adolescent experience. So that's why I find it fascinating to talk about media literacy, because the way that the Purell commercial, the way that you interpret that, the way you hear a song, the way you see a newspaper ad or a magazine ad would be experienced in a unique way. But the designer of it really has an intention of selling you an idea or getting across a message that will shape or influence your life. And that's why I'm curious about the media literacy aspect. Is like, how do you really? You said you're going to have a grandchild. How do you start to like break this down in a way where people go, oh, I see why it's important to be literate about the music, about the TV commercials, about the television shows that I watch, the movies that I attend, because they're also laden with various messages. How do you begin to really break that down so everyone goes, this is something
That's
I
a great
need
question.
to know about?
Well, and Jessica, I think will back me up on this, that it's easier than you think in terms of kids love it. They eat this up because I used to refer to my students as the media literati. You're in on the joke. You can see it, and I would know that I would get these students when they would tell me, well, I went home over Thanksgiving and I was telling my parents about, we were watching a show and I was saying, look at this, okay. And when they come back with those stories, I'd say, okay, I got them. And a lot of the things, drug use and that sort of thing, but also it reflects cultural myths. One of the things you were talking about music, Steve, and the old pop lyrics over and over cumulatively, they would convey messages about romantic ideals. The perfect example was the song "You Are My Everything." Really? You are my everything. I think about that concept. Okay. Well, you can ask students to go through their repertoire and they'll find songs and song lyrics that are essentially echoing that idea that without you, I'm going to disappear. Well, that, there's a certain desperation behind that And there was a reason that during a period, probably not this generation anymore, but there were two ages when people in America tended to marry. When they were 18, when they got out, graduated high school, and 22 when they graduated college. The idea was, well, now I'm going to this new stage of life, and I don't want to go into it alone. You are my everything. Who's my partner at the moment? People make ill-advised choices when they feel pressured by the kind of messages, cumulative messages that they get every time they turn on the radio. And this, you've done this, I'm sure, where you're in the car and you hear a song that you hadn't heard in 15 years, hadn't thought about it. The minute they start singing, you start singing. The lyrics are embedded in your head. They are in there, and they come out when you're singing along with them. Well, so are the messages, and so it's really a question of paying attention, and it's great fun. The students, they love it.
That's interesting you say that, because it was a few years ago, but their song came on the radio and I know I hadn't heard it in 35 years. And it kind of freaked me out because I started singing along and I was like, I can't even believe that I know all the lyrics to this song, having not heard it in such a long time and not even really realizing I knew the lyrics, like when it did come out, but it reaffirmed to me that you hear this over and over and over again, and it does become a part of learned memory, if you will. Jessica, you have a comment
one
about
of the things we haven't discussed is contextual, a manner by which to assess something. And you were asking, how can we, use media literacy? Well, Paul Simon, yesterday, I heard him in an interview, the songwriter, wonderful performer, was saying, well, no, that music that I did 35 years ago, doesn't mean the same now. And he was thinking, of course, about the culture. He was thinking about where he stood now himself, where this communicator who had written this, he was doing a compare and contrast, which we do in the classroom a lot. So the context, the cultural context, the historical context, those are important manners by which to examine something.
When we talk about some of the work we do, especially around, mental health, there's going to be even subtle things. The message that might be received from a student or a young person in let's say in the St. Louis area, is going to be completely different than someone that lives in a rural pocket of, northwest Nebraska. It's a completely different, you're looking for the same outcome, but you need to, is that correct? You need to subtly, change the way you craft the message or present the message.
Audience is so important. You have to take that audience into consideration. You have to know your audience. You know that, Steve, from what you do.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. Interested in sharing your story in a digital format? SAMHSA has a how-to guide for digital storytelling to support the recovery and healing of self and others through messages of hope. This guide can help you plan, organize, and make a digital story. It includes helpful, easy-to-use resources for each stage of the process. For more information, we've put a link in the show notes. Fascinating stuff. It's a great conversation. I want to know from each of you, is there something that we didn't explore? Is there a thought that you want to leave us with? Maybe a favorite resource that the audience could investigate for themselves, or where they could learn more information? Or maybe it's just what you consider to be your sage wisdom. What is it that you would like the audience to know as we part ways? Let's go ahead and start with Jessica.
Thanks again for that one, because local media are so important. Local is where it all starts. Local is where you are. And it gets my goat when people say, oh, I don't read local news. I don't access local broadcasting. They take pride in that. And that just galls me. Local is everything. We have to support local media. And that's how you gain the trust, for instance, or that's how you boot people out, you boot media out. If they're not doing the right job, you've got to let them know.
Yeah. It's interesting. My first media role was in a small town AM radio station. And of course, I was like 19 and learning to be an announcer. And I would always just think, this is ridiculous, this hokey stuff about this small town. And as I'm older, I look back on that and it doesn't exist. It doesn't even exist in my hometown anymore. That station's no longer there. But it not only built community, it also is a representation of democracy, to have that local voice where you go to the school meeting, where you find out what's happening in your own community and try to cipher through what are the important things that the audience needs to know. Now, when I was 19, I was like, I want to go to the big city where the big money is and the rock and roll and all of that stuff. But yeah, I do. I understand what you're saying, that local perspective seems to be marginalized more. So how about you, Stefan? What's something that you'd like to share with the audience on our way out?
I think that, and that will be the basis for a different conversation, but the interchange between media literacy and artificial intelligence. It's the 700-pound gorilla in the room. It's been around for a while. We've seen it on TV and our futuristic shows, but it is sitting with us every day. So the impact of media literacy and its connectedness to artificial intelligence, or the different platforms of artificial intelligence that exist in the world, and how media literacy can successfully interact or improve the concept and acceptance of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was actually thinking about that while we were talking, and then I don't know any of the applications that are out there, but where they can manipulate videos so it looks like a former president is talking about a timely subject, and it's getting to the point where it's even hard to detect that they're not, that it's being made up. And what implications does that have on the media landscape if you can make it seem like something's being represented in a way that was not its intention to begin with? So that'd be a great conversation to have you back for, and we could go down that path and talk about.
And that would include the impact that it would have on from that, for this period of time that we call the COVID years. So they all intersect, but they do have a significant impact, I believe.
Yeah, that'd be a great conversation. How about you, Art? What are we parting
Well,
ways
I mean, there's so much. Just picking up on the AI thing, it's really an interesting hot button issue now. There's certain things that you don't have to sell media literacy anymore to people. You just have to say AI or disinformation, or there's certain things that are really scaring people and affecting their lives. I'm in touch with some people from UNESCO, from the UN, about thinking about ways to use media literacy in terms of AI, the artificial intelligence. And what I'm trying to push is the fact that AI is out of the barn. The information is all out there. It's now the systems are unchaperoned, meaning that they don't have any human interaction. They're going out and collecting information from the entire internet, which is 85% sewage. So when it produces something, information, and students are starting to use AI and like search engine, Google, what is whatever. Well, it's collecting things, but it's not telling you where it's coming from, and it can be coming from about anywhere. Well, again, you can't retract that. You can't take it back. But I think what you can do, and this is where we're trying to get some United Nations coordination going, is to embed media literacy principles and guidelines into the AI system, so that it becomes responsible for filtering the information and being transparent, letting people know this is opinion, these are facts, and this is a body of knowledge, which is different than facts, because I can use facts to back up anything, it's how you use it, but a body of information that so people understand that, and that so that AI can be an ally to us in this effort to really promote responsible information as opposed to being an enemy. And so we're hopeful. We're hopeful. It's an interesting initiative.
Fascinating. Great conversation. I will make sure that I put a link to your website in our show notes. And that way they can make a connection with Dimly if they'd like to learn more about the work that you're doing. I just want to say thank you all for being here today. It's been a great conversation, and would love to have you come back, and maybe we'll go down that path and talk more specifically about some of the implications for AI in the realm of the work that we're doing here through the Mid-America PTTC. But thank you so much for being here today.
And you do good work.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for listening to Prevention Perk, a podcast from Mid-America PTTC. To learn more about our innovations, visit pttcnetwork.org and look under Your PTTC for the Mid-America link. Remember, prevention is better together, and together we are stronger.